the Pharma spinoff that perfected the art of patent abuse. In January 2013, one of the largest corporate spinoffs in pharmaceutical history created what would become the most sophisticated patent abuse operation the industry had ever seen. Abbott Laboratories, a century-old healthcare giant, split itself in two, spinning off its research-based pharmaceutical division into a new company called AbbVie. The newly minted corporation inherited Abbott's crown jewel, Humira, an arthritis drug that was already generating over $8 billion in annual revenue. What happened next would redefine the boundaries of legal monopolization, as AbbVie constructed an impenetrable fortress of over 260 patents around a single drug, delaying generic competition for nearly 2 decades while extracting more than $200 billion from patients and healthcare systems worldwide. This is the story of how a pharmaceutical spinoff perfected the dark art of evergreening, turning patent law into a weapon of mass financial extraction. AbbVie's origins trace back to Abbott Laboratories' decision to separate its slow-growing diversified healthcare business from its high-margin pharmaceutical operations. The spinoff was motivated by investor pressure to unlock value, as Abbott's stock had underperformed due to the drag of its medical devices, diagnostics, and nutritional products divisions. Richard Gonzalez, a 30-year Abbott veteran, was chosen to lead the new pharmaceutical entity, bringing with him an intimate understanding of Humira's potential and a ruthless determination to maximize its profitability. The drug itself, known generically as adalimumab, was a tumor necrosis factor blocker used primarily to treat rheumatoid arthritis, though AbbVie would aggressively expand its approved uses to include Crohn's disease, psoriasis, and other inflammatory conditions. At the time of the spinoff, Humira was protected by basic composition patents that were set to expire in December 2016, giving AbbVie less than 4 years to prepare for generic competition that could devastate the company's revenue base. The patent cliff facing Humira represented an existential threat to AbbVie's business model, as the drug accounted for more than 60% of the company's total revenue. Generic competition typically reduces branded drug prices by 80 to 90% within the first year of market entry, a fate that would have transformed AbbVie from a pharmaceutical powerhouse into a struggling also-ran. Rather than accept this inevitable outcome or invest heavily in developing new blockbuster drugs, AbbVie's leadership made a calculated decision to weaponize the patent system itself. The company embarked on an unprecedented campaign of patent proliferation, filing applications for every conceivable aspect of Humira's composition, manufacturing process, dosing regimens, and delivery methods. These weren't breakthrough innovations deserving of patent protection, but rather obvious variations and incremental modifications that any skilled practitioner could have devised. AbbVie's army of patent attorneys dissected adalimumab into its molecular components, patenting specific antibody sequences, manufacturing cell lines, purification methods, and even the concentration of the drug in its pre-filled syringes. The scope and audacity of AbbVie's patent strategy became clear as the portfolio grew from a handful of basic patents to over 260 separate applications covering every imaginable aspect of adalimumab production and use. The company patented methods for reducing immunogenicity, despite the fact that these techniques were standard practice in antibody manufacturing. They secured patents on specific dosing schedules, even though the optimal dosing for TNF blockers had been established through decades of clinical research. AbbVie patented the use of specific excipients and stabilizers in the drug formulation, components that were commonly used throughout the pharmaceutical industry. Perhaps most egregiously, the company obtained patents on methods for treating specific patient populations and disease subtypes, effectively claiming ownership over basic medical practice. This patent thicket was designed with surgical precision to create multiple overlapping layers of protection, ensuring that generic manufacturers would face not just 1 or 2 patent challenges, but potentially dozens of expensive and time-consuming legal battles. The effectiveness of AbbVie's patent abuse strategy became apparent as Humira's basic patents began expiring in late 2016. While generic manufacturers had spent years developing biosimilar versions of adalimumab, they found themselves trapped in a legal maze of AbbVie's creation. The Federal Trade Commission later identified this pattern as a form of anti-competitive behavior, noting that AbbVie had constructed patent thickets specifically designed to delay generic entry rather than protect legitimate innovation. Each generic manufacturer attempting to enter the market faced the prospect of patent infringement lawsuits that could result in damages exceeding $1 billion, creating a powerful deterrent effect that kept potential competitors at bay. AbbVie's legal team perfected the art of strategic patent assertion, carefully selecting which patents to enforce against which competitors to maximize delay, while minimizing the risk of having their patents invalidated by federal courts. The company's patent portfolio was so extensive that even if generic manufacturers successfully challenged individual patents, dozens of others remained as potential barriers to market entry. International markets provided a stark illustration of how AbbVie's patent abuse inflated drug costs for patients and healthcare systems. In European countries where patent laws offered less protection for incremental innovations, Humira biosimilars entered the market in 2018, immediately driving down prices by 70 to 80%. Patients in Germany, the United Kingdom, and other European Union nations gained access to affordable adalimumab alternatives years before their American counterparts, despite the drug being invented and initially developed in the United States. This price disparity highlighted the artificial nature of AbbVie's monopoly protection, as the same biosimilar drugs that competed successfully in Europe were kept out of the American market solely due to patent abuse. The company's own financial disclosures revealed the magnitude of this extraction, as Humira generated over $15 billion in U.S. revenue in 2018, while earning just $3 billion internationally, despite serving similar patient populations with identical medical needs. AbbVie's patent abuse strategy extended beyond simple delay tactics to include a sophisticated campaign of settlement agreements designed to coordinate the timing of generic entry. The company entered into licensing deals with multiple biosimilar manufacturers, essentially paying potential competitors to delay their market launch until dates that aligned with AbbVie's business interests rather than patent expiration schedules. These agreements, which the FTC characterized as pay-for-delay arrangements, allowed AbbVie to maintain monopoly pricing while providing the appearance of eventual competition. Under the terms of these settlements, generic manufacturers agreed to postpone their product launches until 2023, nearly 7 years after Humira's basic patents had expired. In exchange, AbbVie provided royalty-free licenses and avoided the risk of having their secondary patents invalidated through litigation. This coordinated delay cost American patients and insurers an estimated $100 billion in excess drug costs, money that flowed directly into AbbVie's coffers and shareholders' pockets. The human cost of AbbVie's patent abuse became visible through individual patient stories and healthcare system strain. Humira's list price increased by over 470% between 2003 and 2018, reaching more than $5,000 per monthly dose, making it one of the most expensive medications in the world. Patients faced impossible choices between mortgage payments and medical treatment, while insurance companies implemented increasingly restrictive prior authorization requirements to control costs. The drug's monopoly pricing contributed to rising healthcare premiums across the entire system, as insurers passed along AbbVie's inflated costs to all policyholders. Healthcare economists estimated that every year of delayed generic competition cost the American healthcare system approximately $4 billion, money that could have funded preventive care, medical research, or coverage expansion for uninsured patients. AbbVie's executives, meanwhile, received compensation packages exceeding $20 million annually, directly tied to the company's ability to maintain Humira's monopoly pricing through patent manipulation. Congressional investigations and regulatory scrutiny eventually focused attention on AbbVie's patent abuse, but the company's legal strategy proved remarkably resistant to government intervention. House Oversight Committee hearings in 2019 featured testimony from patients who had rationed their medication due to cost, while AbbVie executives defended their patent strategy as necessary to fund future drug development. However, the company's own research and development spending remained relatively modest compared to the excess profits generated by Humira's extended monopoly, undermining claims that patent abuse was essential for innovation. The Federal Trade Commission filed complaints challenging AbbVie's anti-competitive behavior, but the slow pace of regulatory action allowed the company to maintain its monopoly for years while legal proceedings dragged on. Patent reform advocates pointed to Humira as a prime example of how the American patent system had been corrupted to serve corporate interests rather than promote genuine innovation. But legislative efforts to address patent abuse faced fierce lobbying resistance from the pharmaceutical industry. The eventual entry of Humira biosimilars in 2023 provided a devastating postscript to AbbVie's decade-long patent abuse campaign, as competition immediately drove down adalimumab prices and demonstrated the artificial nature of the company's monopoly. Within months of biosimilar launch, healthcare insurers reported savings exceeding 60% on adalimumab prescriptions, while patients gained access to affordable alternatives that had been delayed for nearly 7 years. AbbVie's stock price declined sharply as investors recognized that the company's extraordinary profitability had been built on temporary patent manipulation rather than sustainable competitive advantages. The company's total extraction from Humira patent abuse exceeded $200 billion over the extended monopoly period, representing one of the largest wealth transfers from patients to shareholders in pharmaceutical history. Richard Gonzalez retired in 2022 with a compensation package worth over $200 million, having successfully transformed AbbVie from an Abbott spinoff into a patent abuse powerhouse that redefined the boundaries of legal monopolization. The Humira case became a landmark example of how pharmaceutical companies could exploit regulatory capture and patent system weaknesses to extract extraordinary profits from captive patient populations, setting a template that other drug makers quickly adopted for their own blockbuster medications.